Hey, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining. So this is kind of a continuation of a video I did a while back where I was trying to update my UConnect Maps in my 2015 Challenger Hellcat. And before updating the maps, I had to update the UConnect software to the latest version, which was 18.45.01. So I did that. Everything went fine. The update seemed to work. I shut the car off and I didn't get back to it for a few days. When I did turn the car back on and take it for a ride, I found out that there was no sound whatsoever coming out of the speakers. And when I say no sound, I mean no static. The radio was working, seemed to be working. I turned the volume up and down. I could see the volume level indicator going up and down, but nothing coming out of the speakers. There was also no sound coming from the GPS navigation. There was no sound coming out of the speakers when I was making phone calls or trying to make phone calls or anything. So that was the situation. I looked online and there was very little regarding this problem as far as what the problem was, how to diagnose it, and so forth. So I did find a little something saying that, well, the first thing to do is check to see if the amp is not working. And of course, the amp is what drives the speakers, and it's after the radio and the UConnect stuff. So I did find that the amp fuse in the trunk was blown. As soon as I replaced that fuse, it immediately blew again. So I knew there was a short somewhere. So in this video, that's what I do. I go the next step to try to diagnose the problem. Again, I couldn't find really anything online about how to do this, and really how to take apart the bottom of the dash where the amp lives. So that's what this video is about. I take apart and remove the panels to get at the amp. I do a test to see if it's the amp or if it's the wires going to or from the amp, and then I remove the amp and talk about what the next steps are. Now, if you don't want to hang on and watch the entire video as far as how to remove the panels, how to remove the amp, and so forth, and you just want to go to the end or near the end to find out what I did to fix the problem, then you can do that now. Otherwise, this is the video on how to remove the amp and fix this problem. So here we go. So here it is. We've got to remove this lower panel to get at the amp, and obviously we have a lot of things to remove to get at that. And we're going to start off down at the bottom with the dorsal kick plate, and basically this just pulls upward and unsnaps, and it's also attached to the A-pillar extension, which is the part that goes upward. So I'm just going to pull that all off. Also, I need to remove this instrument panel end cap, and again, just stick some kind of a plastic tool in there and pry it off. And once again, this just snaps in there. It's not bolted in or screwed in. So you just got to kind of work your way around it and pull it straight out. And that will come out. Just got to pull it a little more. There we go. Just throw it down there. So right here we have a couple of screws that we need to take out so that we can remove that lower panel. But first I want to just remove the A-pillar extension, and I think I'm going to kind of separate the A-pillar extension from this kick plate, and it just kind of snaps together in one place right here. So just got to squeeze that and push it through, and I can put the kick plate aside. And then this is just held on with a couple of fasteners. So I'm just going to pull that straight out, and there are those two snap fasteners. And next, as I said, I've got to remove these two screws, so we'll speed up the action and take those off. And once that's done, the best thing to do is kind of sit in the driver's seat. And this lower panel, it doesn't pull downward. You've got to pull it straight back toward you if you're sitting in the driver's seat. And there are no more screws. It just basically is snapped in. So again, just kind of pull straight back, and that just unsnaps. And there we go. So zooming in here, there's the amp straight ahead. And you can see that there are two connectors attached to it. The bottom white connector is where the power's connected there in that connector. And the top one, I believe, is the speakers. So the next step, so we can get at that more easily, is to remove the connectors that attach to the switchgear in that lower panel. You know, the lights and the trunk release and so forth. So these, you know, basically just unsnap. You got to hit that little locking tab and just pull the connectors out. And the last thing you've got to do here is the hood release. And I kind of blew it here because you can just take that kind of whole mechanism out. You can kind of push a tab and the whole mechanism kind of pulls out. But I kind of did it backwards. I wasn't following an instruction. I was kind of figuring things out myself. So I basically undid the cable while the mechanism was still attached to the lower panel, and then I'm going to push the cable through where it snaps into the mechanism. And, you know, I just squeezed the tabs, pushed it through, and that separates that cable from the mechanism, and we can put the lower panel aside. So here we go again. There's the amp. I have disconnected the connectors. So now we want to go to the fuse in the back of the car in the trunk. And the fuse is located right in front of the battery, the fuse box. And there it is. So I'm going to remove the cover. On the back side of the cover is your little guide that tells you which fuse is which. So there are those fuses there. And if we look here, fuse number 27 is a 25 amp fuse, and that is the fuse for the amp. And there's the location of fuse number 27. And there it is. It's that gray 25 amp fuse. So we're going to grab this fuse puller, which comes with the car. How great, little accessory. And we're going to just attach that to the 25 amp fuse, which is for the amp. And we're going to pull that out. And as you can see, this fuse is blown. Now, the last time I replaced the fuse with a good fuse, the amp was connected, so it immediately blew. This time, I'm putting in a good fuse, but the amp is disconnected. So let's plug it in. And it does not blow when the amp is disconnected. So that means the short is somewhere in the amp, either the power wires or the speaker wires that are connected. So I'm first going to plug in the power with the speaker wires disconnected to see if it's a power short in the amp. So there it is. Now it's the power the connector with the power has just been connected to the amp. We're going to go back to the fuse and see if the fuse is good or bad. And the fuse is blown. So that's it. When the power is connected to the amp, it shorts out in the amp. So that's now what we know is wrong. To make it easier to get at the amp and remove it, I'm going to remove this lower plate, this metal plate. There are only 4 bolts holding it on. I noticed there's a lot of surface rust on this, and I was reading that that's kind of a common thing. But before I put this back on, I'm going to clean it up, sand it down, and refinish it. So I'm going to remove that, get that out of the way. And there's the amp. Now, it's held on. The amp is held on or held under there. It's attached to that metal plate by 3 screws. And here's a closer look at it. And there are 3 screws holding it from the right side that are screwed in from the right side into the amp. And there's a closer look from the right side. I put the camera up in there, and that's the position of those 3 screws. And they're actually torque screws. Here's a picture of the amp out of the car, and those are the 3 screws. They're torque, I believe, T25s. So those just had to be unscrewed, and then the amp just pulled straight down out of the vehicle. And this is what the amp looks like. Here it is, out of the vehicle. So this was the cause of all my trouble. This amp is shorting out somewhere within it. So now we're going to have to talk about next steps. So now that I've diagnosed the problem as being a short in the amp itself and not in the wires leading to or from the amp, I needed to find out where to get a replacement amp or to get this one fixed. So I started off by calling my Dodge dealer, and I spoke to one of the service writers. I let him know that I had tested and removed the amp and that it was shorting out and that it was the amp and it was bad. And what they would do if I brought the amp in to have it, to have it fixed, or if they could get me a replacement. So this is unbelievable. He said, well, before you bring the amp in, put it back in the car, hook it all up, and then bring the car back in. And I said, what? He said, yeah, that's how we have to diagnose it. We have to, hook up all our test gear to the car itself and diagnose it. And I said, hey, listen, I already told you, it's the amp. I've already diagnosed it. I've already taken it out of the car. I'm not going to put it back in the car. Are you kidding me? So I said, okay, maybe I'll just talk to the parts guy directly. So sure enough, he agreed, and I called the parts department, spoke to one of the parts guys, and I told him, hey, I've got a bad amp. My amp is blown. It's shorting out for my 2015 Challenger Hellcat. And he said, the part's been discontinued. And I said, well, the car's not that old. What do you mean it's been discontinued? Do you have a replacement part, right? He said, no, there's no replacement part. So I said, well, okay, if somebody brings in a car to the service department and they need their amp replaced, what do you guys do? And he said, well, we would probably just jerry-rig something. We would probably, get an aftermarket amp and then kind of rewire it. And again, this is another case of, are you kidding me? So I said, do you have any other suggestions? And he said, yeah, you could go on eBay and you could get a used one and then install the used one. And I checked on eBay. They're between $600 and $700 for this particular Harman Kardon amp, and used. So, okay, the next step was to see if I could get it repaired. And these guys at Dodge had no idea where to go or how to do that. So I called Harman Kardon directly, and they said that since it's a Dodge part, they told me to call the Dodge dealer. I said, look, I've already called the Dodge dealer, and after a lot more conversation and back and forth, he finally told me, I said, look, do you have any other companies that repair these things? And he said, yeah, there's a company called United Radio that repairs the amps. Nobody seemed to know this, especially not the Dodge dealer. But I called United Radio, and they said, yeah, sure, we repair these. And by the way, United Radio isn't some small little amp repair company. They're a big operation. They've got offices, they've got some facilities in New York State. They've got some facilities in Georgia. So not a small organization. And they said, yeah, sure, we can repair it, and it would be approximately $350. Great. That's cheaper than the used ones on eBay, and it would have a year warranty. So that was the answer I was looking for. So I'm packaging up this amp, and I'm going to send it off to them. And in the next video, I'll let you know what happened. By the way, if you haven't already done so, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell. That way you'll know when my next video comes out where I explain what happened to my amp. Take care. We'll see you next time.